Hello everyone, my name is Tali Tal, and I would have been very happy to be in Seoul right now in South Korea. Unfortunately, all of us are staying at home. Here we are in third lockdown already in Israel, so I join you from my home office, and I assume that all other people are sitting in their homes as well. And I want to talk with you today about citizen science as science education for responsible citizenship. And just for a moment, look at some major science-related issues that occupy the media in recent years. First is the climate change and the worldwide discussions, protests, conventions, which slowly penetrate into the school curriculum as well. For others, growing GMOs and sanitation are major issues, especially in developing countries. And microplastic is a huge problem for all of us. Vaccination. Well, in 1980, the World Health Organization published this magazine saying that smallpox is dead. It was a huge victory. And many countries were very proud of their vaccination program. 2019, growing movements of anti-vaccination, vaccination hesitation. You read more and more about calls for stopping the mandatory vaccination. But then comes COVID-19, and billions of people are waiting to get their vaccination. I myself got vaccinated last night, and here in the picture you can see the Israeli president, Mr. Ruvi Rivlin, getting his vaccine. So are we retrusting science again? We have to wait a few months to see and to make sure. In the last few years, 4 major policy reports from different parts of the world were published. One by OECD, the other by Center for Curriculum Redesign in the US, and 2 influential reports that were published in Europe. And some of them became very, very influential. And these 4 reports bring up few highlights that are common to the reports. For example, that more traditional instruction is still seen in schools rather than inquiry-based science education. That we still see extensive use of textbooks materials, low use of ICT, and indeed the COVID-19 crisis has shown that in many parts of the world, big populations have limited access to internet and to computers, and so the promise of ICT is not actually a promise for the entire world. And of course, poorly prepared teachers that came up as an issue in all 4 reports. So you might say that nothing is new, and we already know all these challenges. But it is a surprise for me that they bring big questions that are not necessarily discussed enough in the literature. For example, what are appropriate models for professional learning to provide continuous support for teachers to carry out more student-centered pedagogies in all STEM classrooms? What policy changes are needed for curriculum innovations to support a more integrative approach to STEM learning and teaching? How can national policies be reformed to promote the use of diverse pedagogies and formative assessment methods, particularly in secondary level education? And how can teachers that do engage in innovative projects be supported to mentor their peers in inquiry learning and other innovative pedagogies? What I'm going to propose here is that citizen science, which is a form of science education for citizenship, can actually answer some of the concerns that these reports bring. So what is citizen science? First of all, it's people-powered research. It involves volunteers in scientific research projects in various scientific disciplines. It is a rapidly growing research genre that connects scientists and non-scientists around authentic scientific projects, while the two parts do the research together. Citizen science enables research that would not be possible or practical otherwise because of the huge amount of data that crowdsourcing of any sort can provide. And in addition to advancing scientific knowledge, citizen science can be a form of both science communication and informal and formal science education. So why? Why citizen science? Because it advances the use of innovative student-centered inquiry pedagogies. Because it addresses real issues, real problems studied by researchers rather than textbooks and predetermined topics. It brings together schools, teachers, students, communities, and scientists, and offers a range of topics and levels of involvement. And finally, it converges between science and environmental education. As you can see on the right-hand side, this first page of an article published in Science magazine in 2014 by Arian Wallace, Justin Dillon, and colleagues shows how citizen science can become a mutualistic approach to actually integrate science education, science communication, ICT, and in form of citizen science. And some seminal reports actually acknowledge the promise and opportunities that citizen science brings. So on the left-hand side, you can see the American National Academy's report on citizen science, and on the right-hand side, on the right, you can see the Bringing Research into the Classroom report of scientists from Europe that is focusing on citizen science. Why it became so relevant now than ever? Because of the abundance and accessibility of data, because of all these crowdsourcing technologies, and because worldwide we can see calls for public action. Let it be climate change or social justice or any other topic that now gets the attention of the public, which is growing and growing due to ICT technologies. There are global projects that you can use, whether sitting in Israel or in South Korea or in the US. You can be part of the Galaxy Zoo project. You can identify faraway galaxies. You can count and identify chimps in Africa. You can look at how proteins are folding and refold them and unfold them. And these are projects that actually attract thousands of people throughout the world. However, these projects are ones that require the citizens, the participants, mainly to contribute data. However, we at the Taking Citizen Science to School, which is a center funded by the Israel Science Foundation, look at different type of pedagogies and framework. So first we think about breaking boundaries between school and society. And by breaking boundaries, I mean boundaries between traditional silos, such as between educational researchers and practitioners, such as between formal and informal learning environments, between science and data literacies, between schools and out-of-school settings, and between physical and online spaces. So integrating those separate silos and maintaining some sort of relationship actually points to one of the great potentials of citizen science. One of our colleagues suggested the idea of mutualistic ecology of citizen science. And by mutualistic ecology of citizen science, is looking at the ecosystem of citizen science with the different variables in these ecosystems, such as students, scientists, communities, stakeholders, policymakers, and schools, and looking for ways to enhance collaboration between all these parties or variables in this ecosystem. Another way to look at it is at the citizen science as the center of a triangle, and in the periphery of this triangle you can see the science, society, and individuals who collaborate to create authentic and meaningful learning experiences and to allow learning of all parties through real participation. This is the homepage of our website. The website is mainly in Hebrew, but here you can see some, well, at least part of it is in English, and you can see the English URL. And in our center, we developed a theoretical framework that is based on three basic principles. One of them is the idea of Vision 2 of scientific literacy that was suggested by Roberts in 2007, by Roberts and Bybee in 2014, and earlier by Glenn Eichenhead. The idea is that scientific literacy should cultivate a scientifically knowledgeable citizenry to take part in democratic decision-making processes of social significance. So it's not, the focus is not on acquiring knowledge, it's not on mastering practices. It's about being a citizen in a democratic society that has the knowledge and skills to take part in decision making. The second idea is integrating literacies, and we see different literature addressing different types of literacies. There's scientific literacy, health literacy, data literacy, and we look at all these types of literacy as one. And actually we want to identify key competencies that are necessary for STEM learning regardless of their origin. And the third idea is connecting communities of learners. And by communities of learners here, we address different communities, the scientist communities, the teachers community, the students wherever they are, different NGOs and other organizations. And we actually established a TCSS community that integrates all these sub-communities to mutual and continuous discussion and discourse of our citizen science ideas and projects. Here you can see some pictures of our community meetings, and in each one of these communities and around each one of the tables you can find teachers, you can find policymakers, you can find educational researchers, scientists, and through this course we create the different projects which are then adopted by the schools and the teachers in the community. Some of the projects I'm going to show you very briefly. So for example, we have the TCSS Radon Citizen Science projects, in which students across the country get little bottles and monitor with them the levels of radon in their houses, in their bedrooms, and contribute to create a huge database that allows for the first time monitoring levels of radon gas across the country. Using the students also analyze the data using CodeUp, which is a very friendly platform developed by Concord Consortium for data analysis for students. Another project is the TCSS Small Mammal Research, which is done with different grade levels beginning at 4th grade until 9th grade. Students build these footprint traps alone, collaboratively in small groups. They place the traps, they come the next day to take the footprints, they analyze the data together with a researcher from Tel Aviv University, and also get the chance to meet with him and hear and be part of his data analysis. Some other projects are the allergen plant in our street project, the backyard bird count, invasive jellyfish in our coasts that occurs along the Israeli Mediterranean coast, sensing the air, which is an air pollution project, and finally, why the irises would not fertilize, a project that was developed by a graduate student of mine that I'm going to elaborate on a little. So here is Hila at the bottom of this slide, and Hila is a biology teacher and a graduate student who searched for a citizen science project, but she was not interested in a global project. She wanted to create her own bottom-up project. So we consulted with an ecologist that works in the area where the school is located and asked, well, do you have any idea for a worthwhile research? And she actually pointed us to this very rare population of irises, huge, beautiful, dark brown flowers that bloom right outside the school fence. And she said, this ecologist said, well, you know, some of these irises would not fertilize, while others do. So we don't have any data, we don't have any idea why some of them fertilize and others do not. So Hila took the idea and began developing her own project with her own students. So she begins this inquiry project with her students. They mark the area, they come up with inquiry questions, they collect data, they analyze data, yet no scientist is interested. So Hila calls a few plant scientists and tells them about the project, and they all say, well, excellent project, very nice, but you know, we have other priorities. In the meantime, students really develop strong feelings to their research, and when they figure out that the entire area is going to be built with a huge construction project, they begin protesting and arranging conservation efforts and approaching the community. And then parents and community members join, and they arrange other protests. After a while, the scientist from Tel Aviv University hears about all these actions around the irises, about this very unique population. He comes to see and decides to join the project. So eventually he is the one who is guiding the students and teaching them how to pollinate the irises using a very delicate brushes. But eventually, when they figure out that the area is going to be built, he also teaches the students on how to safely remove the irises and replant them in a different location, which is protected area in a nature reserve. In terms of learning outcomes, we can see a few things that happen to the students. We see that their interest in plant science and the environment increased dramatically. We saw how they use various scientific practices, how they measure, how they document, how they monitor, how they identify different parts of the flowers, how they report their findings to the scientists, and so on and so forth. But mainly, we were able to see how they develop agency and activism, and how they became very active in all these efforts to protect the endangered species. And all these three outcomes really talk and draw back with the Science Education for Responsible Citizenship report published by the European Union. The literature tells us a lot about levels of participation and engagement in citizen science project, beginning from citizens, and in our case students, as ones that only contribute data. mainly as crowdsourcing. But in the more complex levels, getting citizens more involved in identifying the problems, in sharing ideas and thoughts about research questions, about taking part in decision making, about methodologies, and participation in all parts of the project. And the fourth level, the extreme citizen science, according to Muki Haklai from the UK, is a real collaboration between scientists and citizens. And in our case, and also something that Haklai writes about, is also cases in which scientists are not involved or they join the effort only later. This typology also corresponds with another typology suggested by Rick Booney that again shows the flow from citizens as contributors of data to more collaborative patterns of citizen science and finally into co-created projects. Finally, I want to share this scheme that was suggested by Arjen Wals from the Netherlands regarding a range of citizen science pedagogies. And actually he shows different sequences between different types of citizen science projects. Beginning from closed projects, which are predetermined and prescribed, to open citizen science projects, which are self-determined and co-created by the citizens and the scientists. From authoritative, hierarchical training approach to participatory citizen science projects, which are more democratic and involve social learning. And if we look at the different roles of the participants, so let's look at the teachers. So in the more traditional ones, the global project like Foldit, the teachers serve as instructors. In the more local projects, or the national projects, such our project with the jellyfish, the teachers act as coaches. And finally, in Hila's project, which was really co-created, the teacher becomes a facilitator and co-learner with her students. If we look at the students, we can see how they turn from passive receivers to active receivers, and finally, to active empowered citizens who really take action. If we look at the motivation, we see flow from extrinsic motivation to intrinsic motivation. And finally, the projects themselves actually change from universal projects like Foldit, like Galaxy Zoo, like the Chimps project, into more national or regional projects like the Jellyfish project that we have in Israel, and finally into contextual local projects like the project of the irises that Hila has developed. To summarize and go back to the big reports, I want to argue that citizen science is interesting to students and enhances engagement, encourages inquiry-based learning and the use of ICT. It is student-centered, as I demonstrated. It offers integrative approach to STEM education and enables crossing boundaries. And it promotes diverse pedagogies and requires alternative assessment rather than prescribed assessment or general assessment. It advances critical thinking, enhances advocacy, agency, and activism, as happened in Hila's project with the irises, and it integrates knowledge, skills, character, and reflectiveness, as the four-dimensional report calls for. We have also some challenges that I don't want to ignore. So we know that teachers need support, but we at the center cannot support each school. And to cope with this problem, we develop off-the-shelf projects that need very little support and allow teachers to carry out the projects alone in their schools. We also focus on co-created projects, understanding that there are not enough scientists to support each project. And projects like HeLAS project really allow minimal involvement of the scientists if they don't have the time. It is difficult to attract scientists from different regions and field of expertise, and therefore we allowed ourselves to broaden the definition of who is a scientist. And actually we call project leaders and committed hobbyists and representatives from NGOs like the Society for the Protection of Nature in Israel or the Haifa Zoo to be leaders of such project, or serve as the scientist of the project. And finally, we try and keep identifying unique features of an active research practice partnership community rather than offering teacher professional development. We believe in the power of this partnership and believe in the knowledge and enthusiasm and involvement of teachers who are really excited about citizen science. With that, I finish my presentation and want to thank you and to express my hope to see you in person next year in Korea, in NARST, and any other conference. Thank you.